Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on a best practice approach to clinical trials labelling. My name is Anita Matthews and I'll be your webinar host for today. We're expecting the presentation to last around 45 minutes, followed by a question and answer session at the end. Please note that we will be muting all the telephone lines during the webinar except for the speakers. So if you do have any questions, please submit them at any time using the question tool on the screen. We'll be collating the answers at the end and we'll look to get through as many as possible. So in order to ask your question, you can send them in via the Q&A widget, which you should see at the bottom of your screen, or please use the top left-hand box. And we'll allocate around 5 to 10 minutes at the end to get through as many as we can. We'll post a copy of the audio and the slides from this presentation onto the PRISYM ID website and notify all registered attendees when it's available shortly afterwards. If you click on the green resource list widget, there are a few PDFs to download and some resources from our speakers which will be available shortly after the webinar. If you require any assistance during the webinar, please use the help widget and a member of the technical team will try to assist you. So if we just move on to look at today's agenda. So in today's webinar, we'll be discussing firstly how to gain an understanding of global clinical trials labelling in practical terms. And then secondly, we'll look to understand how labelling systems can remove the perceived complexities of local language labelling. Thirdly, we'll look to realise how to manage source data for labels, booklets and PILs. And then lastly, we'll look a bit to learn how to customise labels for country-specific requirements. And then at the end, as mentioned, we'll move on to a Q&A session. So I'll now just do a short introduction for our speakers today. We're joined by two specialist speakers, Vince Postil and Craig Jones. So firstly, Vince, he's been tasked with building strategic relationships with key partners to increase market share in a variety of sectors. He has over 25 years experience within the auto ID market, delivering in both commercial and product development roles. Before joining PRISYM ID in 2004, Vince worked for a number of auto ID companies and was responsible for product management and the subsequent sales of various printing solutions. And Craig Jones is the Vice President of Enterprise Sales Engineering for PRISYM ID, with responsibility for understanding customer needs and industry challenges to drive solutions to improve efficiency, minimise risk and address regulatory requirements. Craig has 15 years of experience delivering validated label lifecycle management solutions to life science and also healthcare industries. So without further ado, I will now hand over to Vince, who will take you through the slides.
Hello everybody. As Anita said, my name is Vince Postil and I've been with PRISYM ID for over 11 years, working in life sciences and labelling, and more recently I've been focused beyond just labelling, covering the area of content management for the creation of multiple different types of printed material. What we intend to do today is to outline to you a project that we were involved with that brought together a number of companies to consider the common problems and challenges in clinical trials labelling and to look for a common approach to printing and packaging for clinical trials. We have found in practice many clinical trials companies have similar challenges, and we've been lucky enough to work with several thought leaders in the industry to try and find common approaches to clinical trials labelling, and this is what we will be sharing with you today. We were introduced to Jason Bromfield, Executive Director of Pharmaceutical Development Informatics from Bristol Myers Squibb, who explained to me some of the challenges experienced within the clinical trials packaging area. We had had some experience because of the work we had undertaken in clinical trials supplies space, which included single panelled label design and printing, managing and printing randomisation data, managing the printing of labels for specific trials, and the hardware technology used to print single panelled labels and overprint booklets. However, our experience had been largely restricted to what is termed single panelled labels, which is generally the use of thermal transfer printers to print a label or overprint. This was to change and to expose us to many challenges associated throughout the whole clinical trials labelling process. The area we were particularly interested in exploring was the area of local language management, so we decided to form a group to look into this subject. To consider language looked like an opportunity to consider the start of the process for building all information and data to populate a label. We needed to enlist other companies into the project as well as Bristol Myers Squibb so that we were looking at all of the issues to identify common areas of difficulty and duplication of effort. With a combined approach to the market, we were fortunate enough to work with a number of companies on this project. The group was made up of pharma discovery companies, 6 of the largest companies in pharmaceutical R&D, some clinical supplies organisations, basically the companies that pharma discovery often subcontract to, and the actual booklet manufacturers themselves. Interestingly, the initial group did not include a booklet manufacturer, but very early on it was clear that the creation of booklet artworks and the outsourcing and overprinting of booklets was a very big challenge. To give this group some structure and a clearly defined purpose, we developed a charter with a defined aim, which you can see on your screen now. As part of the exercise, we visited all members of the group to discuss their specific processes and challenges. We concentrated on the interaction of stakeholders in the business, translators, regulators, marketing, packaging and logistics, identifying the various quality checks throughout the whole process, the various interfaces to other systems, and also the involvement and interaction with third-party organisations such as translators and print outsourcing. This collaborative approach was an innovative way of working. Ordinarily, a URS, a user requirement specification, is provided by the client, or we would develop the URS with and for the client to meet their specific business needs. The trouble with a URS is that it lists what a solution must do, but can miss the point about how all the pieces interact and the value to the business in terms of improved efficiencies, savings in materials, and improvements in operational performance. Before we move on, let's briefly consider how the charter had then developed. We had gone from considering simply local language labelling for single panelled labels to considering how to streamline local language labelling for booklets, the front, the back, the index and all the multiple pages, the design processes for booklets and the output to third-party printers. Also single page patient information leaflets, their design, printing and their output, plus country-specific labelling, overprinting technology and vision inspection, plus the integration with other systems. We're now going to consider some of the common challenges we identified during the project. In summary, we identified 9 common challenges that the group would like to overcome. Today we will briefly consider these 9 issues and then we will then focus on 2 key areas. Language management. As companies seek to run trials in new geographies, sourcing, recording, controlling, designing and using language-specific information is now very critical. Local language nuances need to be managed, as does the complete translation process and interaction from the various stakeholders. We'll be looking at language management in much more detail later on. Regulatory country-specific. A system whereby country-specific requirements can be managed efficiently, providing the tools and capabilities to keep up with changes and to ensure these changes are approved and then added to the standard design and trial creation process, will then bring cost benefits and save considerable duplication across the trials. Booklet design. Single panelled label design has pretty well been catered for over the years, but when it comes to multi-page booklets, there are issues with the fact that the final output needs to be sent to a third party for layout and printing. There are multiple checks throughout this process and implications in terms of the trial type and countries involved in the trial. A solution that can design a booklet and output this in a print-ready artwork form offers considerable cost savings, especially with internal and external stakeholders having access to view and approve through the process. Overprinting of booklets. If we use booklets, we need to overprint at time of packaging and or dispatch. This means that there needs to be a break in the process to wait for the booklets to be delivered, and then the process becomes an on-demand overprinting process. A solution that drives thermal desktop printers and online thermal printers is required. And if the substrate and inks are well matched and the production is of a particularly high volume, or the booklet is very thick, then inkjet printing technology can be employed. Duplicate quality checks. Throughout the process of identifying where improvements could be made, the issue of duplicate quality checks was ever present. There are varying degrees of checks dependent upon the processes and procedures followed by an organisation, but what was common was that there appeared to be opportunities in most operations to remove duplicate checks, such as the transfer of check data into a new system using cut and paste, and then the need to recheck this information again. Consolidation. Where an organisation has organically expanded and has acquired many systems across disparate facilities, there exists a compelling opportunity to standardise and consolidate operations in order to drive operational savings through the business. Choosing a platform that supports global deployment and single harmonised processes, yet retains the ability to meet local requirements, is paramount if these business savings are to be realised. Expansion. More complex trials and more regions. Whenever companies wish to exploit the opportunities offered by expansion of clinical trials activities, introduction to new geographies, and leveraging the benefits of mergers, acquisitions, and collaborative activities, being able to swiftly adapt to changing business needs is a vital consideration for any label lifecycle management system. Management of trial data. There appear to be two main distinctions in this area. Large pharmaceutical R&D companies had sophisticated systems to generate the trial data and randomizations, whereas the clinical supplies organisations provided a range of services for taking predefined data from their clients all the way to actually managing the whole packaging patient trial randomisation process. The areas that needed to be considered ranged from mass import of validated data and the need for this to remain validated and the tools to create, manage and record a complete trial from start to finish. Label defects control. Even where each part of the process has been subjected to incessant review and approval cycles, where the production print process has been mostly automated, defects may still occur. Typically, these inconsistencies are addressed by adding layers of human visual inspection against label master documents at various parts of the packaging and labelling process. Being able to leverage the intelligence in the label design and data structure enables machine inspection to be mounted onto printing devices so that labels are forensically analysed as they are produced. A platform that can support the business through these issues and meet the complexity of the supply chain within the regulations will be of paramount importance to business success. We will now consider two areas in more detail, and then we'll move on to illustrate some of the best practices to overcome the issues highlighted. These are the two areas we will be considering in more detail: the complexities associated with local language management and label and booklet design, including country-specific requirements. Firstly, we're going to look at the complexities that surround the need for local language labelling and some of the areas that we identified that need special consideration in any robust and comprehensive system or process. The key objective in phrase creation, translation and management is to ensure that the phrases used on a particular piece of design work are correct and remain correct through the complete trial. Once the phrases have been created and approved, it is required that the content can be used across a variety of final patient-facing artwork, such as the labels, the booklets, and the patient information leaflets. Also, language experts must be able to manage efficiently all of the phrases in their language, and they must be able to monitor the impact of any changes proposed or implemented to the phrase library. Therefore, approved phrases and sets of phrases need to be managed outside of a specific trial and held independent of the trial. One of the goals of a phrase library is to allow native speakers to contribute. This is where access to a system is managed by rigorous security features and user rights. A contributor may have the rights to view and review only and not physically change anything. Creating sets of phrases and grouping phrases is a logical approach, such as dosage phrases. Individual phrases need to be version controlled and managed, as do groups of phrases and mass import of the phrase database. Also, the ability for the user to designate a source language that is used as the original basis for the translation must be accommodated. English as the source is most common, but if the source translation starts in, say, French, it needs to be translated and managed from French to German or any other language. It is useful to be able to import and export source phrases. The ability to be able to bulk import all phrases that have already been translated in a controlled and auditable manner is especially useful when a system or trial is being set up. The handling of plural cases as a process requires specific consideration. Whilst in the UK English there is a well understood convention of singular and plural. In other written languages, however, there are multiple different plurals that need to be managed for the same singular form. An approach to meet these challenges is to use dictionaries. Ultimately, destination labelling solutions must be specific to the individual requirements and must address the reality of the model the company is adopting. The toolkit of capabilities that will support delivering the right translation to the right product, the right label at the right time is required. And by elevating language to the first level data item in its own right, that behaves according to a defined set of rules, means that the data can be curated independently of layout. Dictionaries that contain key phrases that are controlled within translations that are language specific, and more importantly are version and approval controlled in the context of a written language. This allows the flexibility to define large dictionaries of the most common content that can be reused in many areas alongside smaller dictionaries that are specific to individual situations. This means that data can be curated independently of layout and then immediately applied to specific label situations to assess the suitability of the individual phrase. I'm now going to hand over to Craig to consider local language management in more detail.
Thank you, Vince. Hi, everybody. Using configurable dictionaries to define categorized pools of language translations offers many benefits to the clinical trial labeling process. A defined structure for managing language content provides a scalable model through which all label text can be defined. The categorization of data into buckets of phrases simplifies the management and downstream use of language content. A phrase you may hear me repeat during this presentation defines one of the fundamental best practices we advise our clients on. Get the data right to drive a zero defect labeling environment. The required language content for a trial is consolidated alongside the trial data, which may also include imported or internally generated randomization data. Linking the data in this manner will determine what content is required even before the label design process commences. The trial data can also be used to determine the countries involved in the trial and therefore automate the selection of the required language phrases, all configurable via country-to-language mappings. Once linked to the trial data, language content is presented to the label designer in a web-based user interface where content can be added using a drag-and-drop approach to minimize errors on the label design. Data maintained in a single system will eliminate the need to copy and paste content between systems and minimizes risks introduced from human error. Once the dictionaries have been configured to define the required structure for maintaining language content, the translations themselves are added and maintained using a number of tools that support best practice and maximize efficiency. An evolution of existing notifications and user-definable workflows provides two new tools for compiling and reviewing translated content. As new phrase requirements are entered into the system, the user can select the required target languages from a list of system-configured languages before the requests are issued to user groups with defined competencies in these languages. Upon requesting a translation, all users within the group of translators will be notified of the request to support a truly global and collaborative model. Once the target translation has been performed, this is reviewed and subject to a 3-level approval process before it can be used in production. The workflow engine will route the content to the required reviewers, notifying users of any action required as the process progresses towards final approval. The users involved in workflows are again driven by the competency language groups, supported by internal security options to ensure that a specific translator cannot approve their own content. To ensure translations can only be requested and created for approved target languages, a system-level configuration defines the languages available to users. This is supported by a secondary configuration to define country-to-language mappings, particularly important when creating labeling content destined for countries with multiple language requirements. To overcome an age-old problem of ensuring 100% consistency with rendered label content, centrally administered fonts allow an organization to provide a standardized repository of fonts available for labeling activities. No longer do we need to be concerned about administering local workstation fonts on a global level or understanding the variances a range of different operating systems can have on rendered fonts. A simple XML interface for outsourced translation providers allows automated translation requests to be issued before the provision of translated content. Not only does this seamless interface reduce the internal costs associated with translations, but also provides access to translation memory systems available through a number of our translation partners. Memory systems allow providers to minimize effort and therefore cost to the client by avoiding duplicate translations. The interface also supports the manual upload of translations supplied in XML format and can be configured to interface with existing internal systems. When a simple language definition is not enough to support global clinical trials and regulatory regional requirements, we can now add multiple cultural variants of any top-level language. This is achieved using standard ISO terminology, using double-tagged language codes, and is based on a hierarchical structure. This structured content allows phrases to be entered in a primary language as the default translation, then overridden where necessary by cultural variants to minimize the overall number of translations maintained within the system. There are times when a single translated phrase will not fulfill all required variations on a printed label. The handling of plurals is the most notable challenge in this area and is overcome by assigning multiple translated phrases or terms that are driven by user-defined rules. Even complex plural cases such as Polish, where the value of the last digit of a number can determine the correct plural phrase, are supported. Often linking closely to the plural requirements, the ability to include a single phrase with data placeholders will allow the total number of maintained phrases to be significantly reduced. These placeholders are subsequently driven by the associated trial data, and we therefore remove risks associated with a manual entry of this type of variable content. I'll now hand back to Vince.
Thanks, Craig. So the second area we'd like to cover is design, including country-specific requirements. Before we launch into the design process and country-specific issues, we can look at the actual collateral, as each have slightly different requirements from the design perspective, the output method and the technology used to do the actual printing. The elements required on a label, booklet or leaflet are common throughout and include elements such as the text, the phrases, variables, barcodes and boxes, lines and graphics. The process to organise and map data linked to the design will be considered in more detail later on by Craig during the presentation. Labels. A single panelled label is usually printed on a thermal transfer printer such as a Zebra, SATA or Intermec, where labels are on rolls and printed in either an on-demand or in a batch process mode. There is technology available to inspect labels when printed on demand or offline following batch printing processes, which will be looked at briefly towards the end of this session. A printing and inspection technology that is ideal when considering a just-in-time printing approach. Booklets. Booklets are multiple pages and complex, and there is a lead time in their production, requiring an inventory to support a trial. A booklet is generally made up of a back page that carries the glue for adhering to a surface, a front cover that is often overprinted with patient-specific and product data at time of dispatch and pack. A spine, and this is sometimes an area where the overprinting is also placed, and an index to identify the country-specific pages, usually the first page in the booklet, and clearly then the country-specific pages themselves. Booklets are an interesting subject, and their highly specialist printing and production technology is required to produce them. This dictates that their production is almost exclusively outsourced to specialist booklet manufacturers. Consideration must be given to how a booklet is designed and what the actual output from the system or process is that will be supplied to the manufacturing company, and approaches to provide an output in either a single or a multi-page PDF format. Last, we then have patient information leaflets. These are instruction leaflets within the container that provides instruction to the patient. PIL leaflets are not used extensively in clinical trials due to the use of booklets, but I think worthy of inclusion as laser printed documentation that could be printed on demand or just in time can be very useful. Country-specific regulatory requirements and its management is probably the most complex area under consideration for business processes and design. In essence, how do you keep pace with regulatory changes across the globe and apply these changes at the right time to the printed matter? It's really about must, can and cannot. what must go on the label, leaflet or booklet, what can and what cannot be included on the printed item. And the above can also be complicated by the type of packaging, the type of trial or the product. These requirements are for that this must be used, but also we must cover conditional situations where one asset is required based upon the presence or the absence of another asset on the artwork. Generally, the purpose of regulatory labelling for clinical trials is to provide protection of the subjects plus identification and traceability of the trial itself. Some of the regulatory requirements that need to be printed on a label include name of the sponsor, clinical research organisation or investigator, and the trial reference code to allow identification of the clinical trial. But there are country-specific requirements for labelling, creating a divergence from a specific standard across the industry, which increases the amount of work required in the implementation and support of any clearly defined and controlled process. A solution that has a label design tool and booklet design tool is the first step, but the ability for the regulatory affairs specialist to view and approve country-specific designs is important, in exactly the same way as the language information can be reviewed and approved locally by specialist language experts within a controlled, audible process for managing the task. I'm now going to hand over to Craig again. Thank you.
Thanks, Vince. So once our language content and study data has been defined, we can pull this content through onto our label designs. As you will see shortly, it is possible to create a single label design using a few simple tools to support the production of multiple language outputs. This minimizes the number of maintained designs and also provides a great deal of efficiency through the reuse of content. The dynamic label designer is also supported by the regulatory rules engine. Rather than use traditional text-based descriptive guidance on regulatory rules for label designers, now user-definable rules can be evoked within the system at several stages of the labelling process. Firstly, the design interface will harness the rules to present the label designer with all the required regulatory content. Secondly, the label approvers can utilize the rules engine during the review process to ensure the designer has met all the regulatory requirements. And finally, the trial manager can review the labels defined for a trial within context of the trial data to ensure that any changes to the trial do not require any labelling updates. I'll reiterate my point from earlier. Our proven best practice shows that if we get the data right, we will drive a zero-defect labelling environment. This allows us to send a 100% reviewed and approved label to the printer. But what does the printer then do with the label we have taken so much care to ensure is correct? This is where label inspection is so important to the process and ensures we fully close the loop. We'll cover this later in more detail. While just-in-time printing may not be a reality for all clinical trials, we are seeing a noticeable increase in the uptake of this technology in the market. By producing a single panel label that fulfills the requirement of a particular country, can eliminate the costs associated with booklet production and inventory and significantly reduce the time to market. During the label design process, it is vital that sufficient label space for each element of content is allowed. Where a phrase may be short in English, the translated Italian content may have significantly more characters. Text is therefore designed as fit to space to facilitate these data variances within defined minimum and maximum point sizes to maintain legibility while maximizing label real estate. To ensure a perfect fit for all label variations, the label designer has the ability to iterate these designs in all available languages and through all available trial data combinations. Awareness for right-to-left languages such as Arabic are supported by the system and still allow a single label design to be authored for both left-to-right and right-to-left languages with no specific input from the designer as the system automates this justification. By driving dynamic label designs with data, a change to a label phrase or label layout can be invoked in an efficient and controlled manner. Impact analysis and link explorer tools allow the user to determine the overall impact of a change before undertaking any content alterations. We can de-risk the label design process further by offering the designer a drag and drop approach to label design. With awareness of the content already included on the design, and no need to create or manually configure placeholders, the end-to-end design process is greatly simplified and less prone to human error. In the next few slides, we'll see an example of a dynamic language label using the standard interface. This first screen shows an English layout with some of the available language content provided to the designer in the bottom right pane alongside the study data. The designer can now select to preview the design in any available language from the interface menu. In this next example, we'll select French. You can now see exactly the same label design presented in French with automatically resized content where appropriate. We'll look at the same for Italian, and then finally the same for Russian. Each example here is using exactly the same label design. So hopefully these slides give you a flavour of some of the tools now available to the market within a single end-to-end solution. While dynamic language content is great for single panel labels and just-in-time labelling, fixed language content is more appropriate to booklet design. I'll cover a few of the latest innovations in this field which assist the booklet design process. The new multi-page label designer is now available via the same user interface as the single panel label designer. A single system can therefore be implemented by organisations as a consolidated approach for all label and booklet designs, as well as single panel label and booklet overprinting. Following the same principles as a single panel label design to drive zero defect labelling, we are also able to define static language content and assign this to individual artwork pages. The automation of page layouts represents the biggest challenge and cost saving in the booklet design process. By harnessing the regulatory rules we mentioned earlier that define what content must be included for each participating country in a trial, we can now provide the booklet designer with a list of must-have content already included on individual language page layouts. The ordering of languages in these automated layouts is configurable to ensure English is included as the final page if required. Impact analysis and link explorer tools are now available to identify where any content has been used. This provides a simple answer to some common problems, such as, I know we've been using this phrase for the last 5 years, but what label designs and booklet has it been included on? Both discrete and global content changes are efficiently implemented through the centralized management of all content in a single system. This is supported by explicit version-controlled linking of content through change analysis and collaborative red marking tools. So these next slides show a few examples. So a booklet layout with English as the back page, so page 4 of 4, followed by Russian, followed by Italian, followed by French. And the final management of all pages within that booklet to change ordering, and all language content on those slides is static. The final step of the booklet design process is the production of artwork for issue to the booklet manufacturer. The tools available make this output a simple and controlled process that is subject to full historical analysis, electronic signatures, and a secure audit trail. The user-definable output formats can include crop marks, fold marks, registration marks for colour printing, depending on the requirements and processes of the manufacturer. All PDF artworks are produced with embedded fonts to avoid downstream rendering issues. Selectable text content can be transposed into other systems, such as booklet manufacturers' vision systems, to ensure the final printed content is 100% correct. The two examples I show here show different examples of final output artwork layouts. I'll now hand back to Anita.
Excellent, thank you, Craig. So we've just got a short poll question for you now. You've I heard Vince and Craig talking about several challenges facing clinical trials companies. So the question that we're going to pose to you now is, which area do you rate as the most challenging for 2015? So you'll see a number of options on the screen in front of you, and if you just select which one you feel is the most challenging, you may well need to just scroll down on your screen a little bit to see the full range of options, and then at the bottom of the screen you should see a submit button. So I'll just read through them for you. So firstly, we've got language management. Secondly, we've got just-in-time labelling. Then we've got multi-page booklet design. We've got country-specific labelling. Duplicate quality checks. Trial data management. And then lastly, we've got label defect control. So obviously you may well feel that all of the above apply, but if you just select which you feel is the most challenging, we can kind of collate those results live, and then hopefully in a couple of moments we should be able to see what results we've had come in, and obviously the guys will be touching on a number of these issues in the upcoming slides as well. So I'm just going to move on and see what we've had come in. Okay, interesting. So I'm just going to scroll down a little bit further. So we seem to have had our top issue that's come in is country-specific labelling. So I guess really not too much of a surprise. We've had 39.7% on that, and our second top challenge is the language management and the just-in-time labelling. Yeah, so guys, I don't know if there's any comments that you wanted to add onto that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly from the project I was involved with that described at the beginning of the presentation, it started off, as I said, as very much a sort of managing sort of language information, but moved very swiftly on to how we could address the country-specific requirements. So I mean, the 40%, close to 40%, that's very high in terms of how that should be addressed, and there's a challenge for all companies. So, yeah, it does reflect very much on that project that we were involved with. So thank you very much indeed for contributing to that. And also the just-in-time labelling. That's another very interesting statistic there, really, in terms of moving away from, clearly sort of for stock and batch to moving very much more to a print-on-demand, destination printing, just-in-time printing, something we're seeing throughout the environments we're working in, throughout the whole life sciences marketplace, basically. So, yeah, very, very good. Thank you very much. So I want to sort of move on now to sort of best practices, and we are going to drill down a little bit more detail, but I do think we've already covered some of those best practices. I mean, Craig is sort of drilling down into some of the main issues, has illustrated some of the best practices, but we're going to pick out a few. So what I'd say is that the clinical trial supplies process requires the designs of labels, booklets, and patient information leaflets be populated by information from data from a range of data repositories or systems, including trial data and production data. There are a number of base capabilities that are common throughout any fully compliant system that meets current good manufacturing processes, and clearly one that meets country-specific requirements, such as the FDA 21 CFR Part 11 in the US. It makes sense to consider the elements briefly and to understand in principle what they offer, as disparate systems that use different approaches will not only cause complications, but they can increase the operational overhead and risk. So in essence, the process needs to be proven, reliable and robust, and if the pieces of technology that provide this functionality are able to be reused and are common throughout the system, the user's experience will be enhanced by a standard approach throughout all the processes that takes place in the field of data and language management, plus label and booklet design. A robust system with solid foundations will have a common and reusable approach to security. We've already mentioned 21 CFR Part 11, so highly desirable there. Version revision control. This is not only for clearly data and images, but also the actual designs and templates themselves. The ability to search the system very, very efficiently to sort of drill down on the information you're looking for. And auditing, trial and reporting of the various actions and transactions that have taken part place. And clearly connectivity to other systems. Any system that's focusing on label design, printing, packaging, etc., must interface with other systems, whether that be sort of ERP, manufacturing execution systems, basic ERP systems, any inventory management systems. So the ability to have a connector approach to those types of systems is critical. Craig will now dig a bit deeper and explain in some what I think are very relevant pieces of technology that can help in these areas. So he's going to be covering workflow management, full text search, impact analysis, and vision inspection. So I'll hand over again to Craig.
Thank you again, Vince. User-definable workflows are used to drive the content review and approval processes. An unlimited number of workflows can be defined to support multiple parallel and sequential processes. Each step can include many users and groups, with each member of the step being notified on screen and by email when their input is required. Real-time searching of all text-based content is now a reality. Regardless of where this content sits in the labeling environment, in language phrases, in trial data, or directly added to a label design, specific text content can be located in an instant with wildcard searching also supported. The search results are hyperlinked and filterable for ease of access and navigation. Once the desired text is located, the analysis tools quickly identify where this content has been used. Analysing the impact of where content has been used is a significant challenge for the industry. Impact analysis reports are used quickly to assess the impact of any content change. These are provided as real-time visual representations and downloadable text-based reports. In the visual representation of our labelling content, we can see the impact of changing a single phrase throughout our entire organisation via the linked data structure. So from the phrase through to our treatments, through to our protocol data, and then finally down to the labels and booklets where that content has been presented, all fully traceable and reportable through impact analysis tools. The final challenge of a zero-defect labelling environment is ensuring the printed content exactly matches the requested print job. Closing this loop is now possible via a fully integrated inline inspection system. By implementing a single end-to-end solution that manages all labelling data, including trial data and language phrases and label designs, means the same solution lends itself perfectly to perform final inspections of all printed content, including verification of randomized content, which is unique on a per-label basis. A single solution also allows the label designer to define the inspection requirements of the final printed label. Traditionally, this will be performed by a separate system and a separate operator. This consolidated approach minimizes the total number of systems that need to be implemented and drives huge efficiency gains over manual human inspection or by non-integrated vision systems. Inspection results are now recorded in a centralized audit log alongside the print job request. This provides a simple parent-child relationship between the labels requested, or the print jobs, and the requested and the results of the inspected labels, all for future review. By fully automating the inspection process, a single user can operate multiple printers and parallel printing activities, providing consistency via electronic systems. Also removes the potential for human error during the inspection process. Automated solutions can be used to verify every field, including barcodes, on every label, rather than relying on manual gross quality checks. The solution is provided by the latest vision technology, designed to fit discreetly within the housing of existing printers to minimize the impact on the production environment. The solutions I have shared with you today have focused on a few of the key industry challenges we have identified. I hope this content has been of value, and I look forward to discussing our solutions in person or show how new technologies can lead to a competitive advantage. I'll now hand back to Vince.
Thank you. In summary, a solution and process is required that manages users throughout every step, from data creation, design and management through to printing. The underlying system being based on the GAMP5 model to gain GMP compliance, and in terms of technology, a web-based solution would be desirable. You should aim to use a standard approval and version control process throughout, maintaining separate versions of each asset with an approval management system that allows the users to highlight and comment in any areas for correction that are relevant to the asset being reviewed. The process used must provide a coherent version control procedure and incorporate collaborative approval management. It should allow multiple items to be grouped together into logical containers and allow users to make decisions on individual items without having to compromise the decision on an entire job. An end-to-end solution will provide this control, enabling you to achieve an efficient, compliant labelling process. And I hope that diagram there sort of illustrates some of what we've been talking about today in terms of connectivity to other systems, security, audit trail, the ability to search, version control, and also obviously to get the approvals through the system and then output to the different technologies, whether that be thermal transfer, inkjet or PDF output to third parties. Thank you for listening. I hope today we have provided an insight into the challenges within global clinical trials labelling and how a single dedicated solution can provide a robust end-to-end approach. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Vince, and also to Craig. So we're now going to move into the Q&A part of the session. So please bear with us just for a few moments while we collate some of the questions that have come in. I can see there's quite a few that have come in. We'll try and get through as many as we can, but if we don't get to your question, don't worry. It will be covered. The guys are going to do some follow-up after the session. So any kind of queries or questions that you have, you can kind of chat to them on a one-to-one basis. So I'm just going to go through some of these on a kind of ones that have come in first. So the first question that we've got here is, you mentioned e-labelling on one of the slides. Can you please expand on this? So I don't know who wants to take that one.
If I grab this one.
Yeah.
It's Craig. So e-labelling, it's becoming a reality. And actually, we're working with a number of industry innovators in this area. So if we look at the solutions that we provide, the same tools actually that we use to generate the PDF artworks can also be used in a configured manner to output to a web portal. And that in turn then facilitates the consumption of that e-labelling content, either by the patient or the sponsor, depending on who's accessing it. And of course, we can use kind of latest technology that you may have seen available out there, so barcodes and QR codes to lead the users directly to that content via hyperlinks.
Yeah, I think maybe I can sort of pitch in there. I mean, a lot of work we've done is in both sort of medical device, using e-labelling, but in clinical trials, I'd say that it's an area where there's a lot of interest. I was at the 5th CTS European Summit in Frankfurt last week, and it was right up there as one of the main subjects. I think that the problem with it really is that it's a desirable area to actually sort of start posting information, instructions onto the internet effectively, and being able to update dates, use dates, etc. But I think there's a lot to go through in terms of the regulators that are accepting this in the market. So there's a lot going on there. So I know that IPSC, I think they're doing some sort of studies, and there's some working parties set up looking at technology and lobbying, etc. If anyone's interested in that and find out a bit more about that, then please contact us and we can provide some further information which may be of use to you.
Excellent, thank you guys. The next question that we've got is it possible to design a single label for all destination countries for a trial?
Yeah, I'll take this one again. This is a subject which comes up often, and I think the answer is actually very subjective, based on the participating countries for a particular trial. I think that the standard answer is no, or certainly not always. But we've introduced some capability to address those issues. So where we do want to use a single panel label, which is language dynamic, what we can do is pull together all of the countries and languages that can take a particular layout, and we assign those to a certain language pool. If there are then other countries where the layout of the final label means it can't be produced from the same dynamic layout, then absolutely we'll create another layout to manage that and assign that to another language pool. So we then might find that second language pool is available for another of the other trial countries. So I think as well, the label designer offers some very advanced functionality. We actually offer the ability to layer the labels, and those layers can be data driven. So we can switch layers of content off and on depending on the data values we're passed, so maybe for the destination countries. And also a facility called sublabels, which allows us to define dynamic areas of content which are based on a different label design. So I think technically there are certainly 3 different approaches there, and really I think it's very subjective again based on the trial and the countries involved. But certainly any one of those will add efficiency into the label design process.
Excellent, thank you for that. The third one that we've got is, are there standard industry language phrases and icons?
So yeah, I'll take that because this is Vince, because I'll split that into 2 actually, because it was one of the areas that the group, when we got together, there was sort of a keenness to have some sort of standard phrases. I do know that EDQM, European Directorate for the Quality of Medicines, has got some very sort of basic sort of phrases that are used, but to my understanding there isn't a set of phrases yet, and I think that's got to be agreed at a pretty sort of high level. So it's something we looked into. We've partnered with translation companies ourselves, so we do work with translation companies, but as of yet I haven't got a sort of a set of set phrases. The icons, I'll take that as separate, because my experience is not all companies use sort of icons and images on their labels, but some do clearly. And I have heard, again through the summit I went to in Frankfurt, that the ISPE are sort of looking into a set of icons. So again, that may be useful going forward.
Excellent, thank you very much, Vince. And then we've got the next question is there a minimum point size for labels? Again, I'll start with that. In terms of what I've seen out there is really sort of 6 point generally accepted, but it's I do believe it. You can go a little bit smaller than that, I think, but it's got to be legible. So I guess it does depend on what you're trying to fit onto the label. I mean, Craig, have you got any experience on that?
Yeah, I think legibility is key, and legibility is not only driven specifically by point size, but also maybe the font and therefore the language being used on the printed label. And actually that can drive not only the point size we use in the label design, but also the printing technology we use. So if we look at some of the Asian language sets with very complex characters, we actually have to up the hardware. We have to move to a higher resolution printer in order to facilitate accurate printing of those character sets. So not only about the label design, it's also, I think, about the printer hardware as well. And then following the printer hardware, it's also about the resolution of the inspection systems as well. So many considerations, but I think you're right, Vince, 6 points is the generally accepted minimum, although we've all seen exceptions to that.
All right. Thanks, Craig.
Excellent. Okay, thanks, guys. I think we're pretty much out of time now. I know there are a couple of other questions that we haven't managed to get to, but if they're not, the team will be in contact so that you can discuss any queries that you have. Just to mention again, there will be a webinar watchback available of the slides shortly after, so you'll get a notification about that. And for any other questions, please do feel free to contact us on the email address that's on the screen, which is info@prisymid.com. Alternatively, visit our website, prisymid.com, where you can find all sorts of information there to download. And feel free to follow us on Twitter, and we are also on LinkedIn. So thank you very much for your time today. We hope that you found it informative, and many thanks for joining us.